We don't usually use the front door. We usually go through the side door to the garage or the sliding glass doors that lead to the patio. To the right of the entryway is the formal living room. It's kept very neat, but it's the room we go to the least. On the left, at the end of the entryway, there's a hallway that goes to 3 bedrooms, including our spacious master suite and a guest bathroom. The formal living room is filled with darkness because the massive curtains are closed. It has a white camel. There's a white couch against the back wall, with big wingback chairs on either side, and a walnut coffee table in the middle. I was sitting in one of those chairs, facing away from the archway between the entryway and the living room. In that chair, I often think about my life and think about what I might lose when Lynn's not around. I'm worried about ending our troubled marriage, and about our friends deciding to side with one of us. I'm also worried about losing our house, getting alimony payments for years, and suddenly losing half my money, plus legal expenses. But despite all that, I've been thinking a lot about Lynn lately. I describe her as vindictive, and that's definitely a challenge for me. The side door opens, and it's Lynn coming back from the grocery store. I realize I should have pretended to be in our bedroom to avoid another argument. If I'd been in the living room, there probably would have been an argument. Lynn's unwarranted criticism of minor infractions, fabricated reasons, or no reason at all is a common source of conflict. I understand it as a tactic to keep me off balance. Lynn can prolong arguments for weeks over trivial matters, and I always find a way to placate her. I believe it's better to end disputes promptly, but I deem life unbearable. Lynn's criticism is always unwarranted, and it's hard to keep up with her. She'll go on and on for weeks over nothing, and I always end up winning. I think it's better to put an end to it, though I can't handle the constant fighting. I try to settle things as soon as I can, but it's hard because there's always another fight coming up soon after. I've been married for 10 years, and I don't see a solution other than to die or get divorced. But I keep trying to make things better, mostly for my own sanity, not to make things better. After 10 years of marriage, I see no solution other than death or divorce. Lynn and I have been fighting lately. I hear the freezer door shut, and I realize she has put away the frozen food. I'm bracing myself for her orders and criticism to avoid her for as long as possible. I'm waiting for her call or whistle, which resembles that of a dog, has become nearly unbearable. Instead of her voice, I hear light footsteps as she approaches the entryway. If I had looked, I would have seen her stop at the tiled entry floor, peering down the hallway to ensure she is alone. Quietly, Lynn contemplates calling me in the car before getting home, but I'm sure I'm working on the gazebo, and in the backyard seconds later, I hear her cell phone ring as she dials a number. She's standing in the entryway, just 5 feet away from where I'm sitting. Lynn talks to her dad about plans for Thursday afternoon and says she'll call him at work after 1 o'clock and the logistics of their meeting. Still, I listen as Lynn talks about details with her dad, concluding with a light, "I'm working on the gazebo and in the backyard," and I assume Lynn is doing the same. Seconds later, I hear her cell phone ring as she dials a number. She's in the entryway, just 5 feet away from where I am. Lynn talks to her dad about plans for Thursday afternoon. She says she'll call him at work after 1 o'clock, and they'll talk about the meeting. I listen to Lynn talk to her dad, and then she says goodbye. I hear the flip phone shut off, and then I hear her footsteps across the carpet, heading towards the sliding glass door. She's whistling and telling him about the gazebo project she's working on in the backyard. She doesn't seem to notice my breathing is getting faster, and my heart is pounding. I've been in tense situations before, so I have automatic responses from my time in the army and other places. The first rule is not to panic, unless you're actually under attack. I heard the flip phone close and her footsteps retreat across the carpet towards the sliding glass door. She was whistling and calling out to the gazebo project he had been working on in the backyard. She seemed oblivious to my labored breathing and the pounding of blood in my head. Tense situations were not new to me, and I relied on automatic responses, honed from my experiences in the army and elsewhere. In such moments, the first rule was not to panic unless actively under attack. Utilize knowledge to one's advantage. Choose the right time to engage. Maintain a blank face, control breathing, and appear normal. I stood and entered the den, stating, "I'm here." I was in the bathroom. I've got to run to the hardware store and get parts for the gazebo. I crossed through the den towards the kitchen and the side door, while avoiding eye contact with her. I marveled at my ability to articulate those words and my restraint from reacting violently. I walked by, and she gave me a look, noticing the redness in my face. She told me to wear a hat because she was worried about me getting sunburned. She said she didn't want to see my skin peeling off in a few days. She also told me about the groceries that needed to be brought in before we left and said not to be gone all day after dropping her phone in her purse on the kitchen counter. Lynn went out to check my work on the gazebo and gave me some feedback when I came back. Lynn's communication style was typical, mostly just giving instructions. She told me to wear a hat and said she was worried about me getting sunburned. She also said she didn't want to see my skin peeling off in a few days. She also told me about the groceries that needed to be brought in before we left and said not to be gone all day after dropping her phone in her purse on the kitchen counter. Lynn went out to check my work on the gazebo and gave me some criticisms when I got back. Lynn's communication style was typical, mostly giving instructions and implicitly criticizing me. As she entered the backyard, I got her phone, checked the last dialed number, memorized it, and put it back in her purse. After putting away the groceries, I left them in my small pickup truck, but I didn't head for the hardware store. I stopped at a local park a couple of blocks away for the first 15 minutes. I replayed the short conversation in my mind, wanting to make sure I had every word memorized to make notes. There was no doubt about its meaning. My wife was having an affair, likely in our she was even sleeping in the house, or maybe in our bed. While I was at work I felt like I was paying for her affair by working to support her. Who was the man she called Daddy? It wasn't her real father. The area code was local, and her parents lived 1,000 miles away in California. In the early days of our marriage, she sometimes called me Daddy during sex, though she had stopped doing so. I had thought she might be signaling a desire for kids, but we decided not to have children a couple of years into the marriage. She was definitely a daddy's girl when it came to practical stuff. I thought about the best way to handle things. Her lover was probably going to come in through the back gate on Thursday, probably down the alley. I thought about surprising him there, but I wasn't sure about dealing with my cheating wife if he was on foot. His car had to be close by. I figured the lover would probably leave his car at the park. It was important to figure out who this person was. The obvious thing to do was to call the number from her cell phone, and have someone. She was clearly a daddy's girl when it came to practical stuff. I thought about the best way to handle the situation. My guess was that her lover would enter through the back gate on Thursday, probably down the alley. I thought about ambushing him there, but I also wondered about dealing with my cheating wife if the lover was on foot. His car had to be nearby. I figured the lover would probably leave his car at the park. It was important to figure out who this person was. The obvious approach was to call the number from her cell phone. Having someone else make the call as if by mistake seemed plausible. With a woman being the most likely to get information, who could make that call? Who else might know about this? The answer was clear: Lynn's best friend was Sue. If Sue didn't know, I doubted anyone else did. Lynn's sister was unlikely to have information, since they had not been close since the sister's messy divorce and subsequent estrangement from the family. Could I ask Sue? I had known her as long as Lynn had, and Sue had always been my friend, too. However, women, they were more loyal to each other than to their spouses. Sue was married to Nick, who was 15 years her senior, and they seemed to be the most loving couple in the world. I figured that Sue would tell Nick almost anything. Would she disclose information about Lynn, though? Did I consider Nick a friend? We weren't close friends, but Nick was an upstanding guy, and I would have thought he would have told me if he'd known about something like this. I decided to try Nick, which meant a drive to the golf course where Nick sent me. I was a Goodwill ambassador for the course on Saturdays, and in exchange, I got a free round of golf during the week when the course wasn't busy. On the way there, I planned my approach very carefully because I couldn't just blurt it out. What if the news got back to Sue and then to Lynn? I had to be sure that I was driving in a golf cart. I was thinking about what I'd say if I was Nick, riding in a golf cart with him checking on the 7th hole. I asked him what he'd do if he was in a situation where he had to keep something confidential, like if he was talking to Sue. Nick gave me a weird look and kept driving for a bit. I asked Nick if he and Sue always shared what they heard from other people, even if it was shared in confidence. It was just a hypothetical scenario. Nick pulled over onto the grass and turned to look directly at me with an almost expectant expression. He said, "Do you have a specific question for me?" I asked Nick if he could keep our conversation confidential if I were to pose a question, making a promise that I wouldn't mention it unsolicited, but if Sue were to inquire, I wouldn't lie to her. That was my operating principle. I assured him that I could keep a secret, but I wouldn't lie to my friend or wife. Nick seemed to know something, and I could tell he wanted to share it with me. After catching my breath, I asked directly if he knew about my wife possibly being unfaithful. I rephrased to make it clearer, asking if he had any knowledge of an affair. I asked Lynn if she was currently having an affair or had one in the past. Nick started telling me about something that happened at the Hollands party last New Year's. Everyone was outside getting ready for the fireworks show when Sue got sick from the champagne. She drinks champagne only sometimes, but she went upstairs to the bathroom. On the landing, she heard someone trying the doorknob while she was puking in the toilet. When she washed up and left the bathroom, she heard noises coming from down the hall, where it turns towards some bedrooms. She was afraid someone else might be sick, so she went down there and looked. Lynn was up against the wall at the end of the hallway, and a big guy was standing there. There's no good way to say it, but he had her against the wall with her legs wrapped around his waist. Lynn saw Sue standing there, and she smiled and gave her a little wave, like, "Get the hell out of here, on your way home." She shared the details with Nick. Sue and Lynn are close friends, so they needed to talk about it before doing anything. I told you right away. Sue talked to your wife, who told her that the thing that happened with Buddy White was a one-time thing. Sue told your wife that the incident with Buddy White was a one-time thing that happened after they'd been drinking and had a disagreement, and that Buddy made some aggressive advances. Sue knows that Buddy's a known bully who married into money, so she asked me to keep it secret because she didn't want to risk your marriage over something so minor. But I told Sue that if we needed to talk about this before we did anything, I told you right away. Sue talked to your wife, who told you that the thing that happened with Buddy White was a one-time thing. It happened after they had a few drinks, you and Sue had a fight, and Buddy made some aggressive moves. Sue knows that Buddy is a known bully who got rich by marrying into money, so she asked me to keep it a secret. She didn't want to risk your marriage over something that's only happened once. But I told Sue that if you ever asked me about it directly, I wouldn't lie. This secret has been weighing on me for the past 5 months. I'm glad it's out in the open, but I'm really sorry that you're going through this. Unfortunately, it's not over yet. Sue lied to Lynn about what happened with Buddy, or maybe with someone else. I'll be honest, it's been really tough on me for the last 5 months. I'm glad we're finally talking about it, but I feel really bad for you. I heard Sue talking to Lynn on the phone just an hour ago. Let's go back to my place and talk about what's going on. We left the golf course in different cars and went to Sue's place. Nick told his wife, and she started crying. She had really been hoping for Ma. Sue was willing to offer any support she could, but upon learning that the affair was ongoing, her demeanor shifted. She experienced a sense of betrayal similar to what Lynn had caused. Up until now, she had believed the assurance that the affair had ended and had based her actions, or rather. Sue was upset when she learned about the affair. She had believed that it was over, and she based her actions on that. But now she felt like she could do something. She looked at Lynk's phone, and she had the number she called. Would you mind calling him and pretending it's a wrong number to get his name? I want to confirm who she's involved with now. Sue, an editor working remotely, had a PhD in English. Sue, you could do something for me. I checked Lynk's phone, and I have the number she called. Would you mind giving him a call, pretending it's a wrong number, and trying to get his name? I want to confirm who she's involved with now. Sue, an editor working remotely, had a PhD in English. She used her acting and social engineering skills to make the call. She chose her perfect English accent, and she always left a lasting impression. With the phone on speaker, she heard him say, "This is Buddy White." Sue blinked. "Sorry, wrong number." Well, that was. She had a theater background, so she used her acting and social engineering skills to get the info she needed. She chose her perfect English accent, and she always left a lasting impression. She dialed with the phone on speaker, and she heard, "This is Buddy White." She blinked. "Sorry, wrong number," she said. Well, that was surely unsatisfying. She told me the whole story, and it all unraveled. But the revelation was clear: Lynn hadn't terminated the affair with White. I added another piece of crucial data to the conversation. I insisted on catching the duo during their upcoming Thursday encounter, aiming for extensive ammunition. I wanted to confront my wife with plenty of facts, catch her in the act, and expose the lies she'd used to cover it up. I was reluctant to hire a detective because of the cost and because I wasn't sure about Li's interactions before Thursday. So, I was looking for a quick way to gather evidence. I wanted to confront my wife with evidence, but I didn't want to hire a detective because it'd cost a lot of money, and I wasn't sure how Lynn would react. Sue suggested that we get a mole, and she suggested that we get Lynk's best friend to extract the truth from her. I wasn't sure about that, but Sue insisted, saying, "Never underestimate an angry woman. I've had enough of her and how she's treated us." They sat in silence for a while. Sue said we should get Lynn's best friend to talk to her. I wasn't sure, but Sue said we should. She said, "Never underestimate an angry woman. I've had enough of her and how she's treated us." Sue said she could make a story that would make Lynn talk. We made a plan. Sue called Lynn really fast and said she needed help. She arranged to meet with Lynn on Sunday morning over coffee. Nick would change Sue's old purse to hold a video camera that would record everything she said and her face. Sue was planning to call Lynn and ask her to meet for coffee on Sunday. She was going to tell Lynn everything. Sue's old purse would have a video camera that would record everything they said and how they looked. By Sunday afternoon, they would have a lot of information. Sue called Lynn and said she was in a situation like the New Year's party. Lynn said she would meet with Sue at the coffee shop. Sue was happy that her friend was being more confident. Sue got to the coffee shop early and chose a table under an awning. She set up her purse with the camera that was hidden and tested the audio. She put chairs in a certain way so there wouldn't be any wind. She set it up to record with one button and the 16 GB card that would have enough space. Nick had thought of a good way to do this. Sue had the camera and purse with Velcro straps covering the lens and MIC holes in the purse's pattern. She was all set when Lynn arrived. Sue asked Lynn to grab coffee and said she'd save their spot in the most secluded area. Sue pressed the button when Lynn returned with the drinks, quickly confirming that Sue was all set, and Lynn showed up with the coffee. They quickly got to the point and started recording. Sue told Lynn about her situation, saying there's this guy who's into her. She's not sure what to do. She said he's hot, especially since it's been a while since she and Nick were an item. Sue said Nick is totally into her. He trusts her completely and she's never cheated on him. But she admitted feeling tempted now and wanted to know how Lynn felt after the New Year's party. Lynn encouraged her, saying, "Go for it, girl. Honestly, I can't fathom. Why haven't you done this sooner? Nick's nice, but honey, he's past his prime. You're still young and cute. I've always admired your appearance, but I've never understood why you waste your time with Nick." Sue was surprised by Lynn's lack of remorse and asked if the New Year's party was genuinely a one-time thing. "Time thing?" Lynn explained, "Honey, I won't lie to you. I had to tell you that at the time, or you might have spilled the beans, but now that you're in a similar situation, we can share all this. In fact, we'll be having some real steamy discussions." Lynn, spill everything. "I'm so into this now that I'm thinking of doing it myself." "How did it start with you and Buddy? Are you still at it? You should see the look in your eyes if you're not excited now." "I bet you will be in a few minutes, Lynn." Lynn told me all about her encounter with Buddy at Holden's Halloween party. She said they met 2 months before. When Buddy was eyeing her at the party, she explained that they met up on the landing and ended up in the bathroom. She described the passionate encounter, talking about how great Buddy was. Lynn said she was still with him and would be meeting him next week in her own bed. Then Sue asked about my feelings about any guilt. Lynn told us about her encounter with Buddy at Holden's Halloween party. She said they met 2 months before, when Buddy was checking her out at the party. Lynn said they met in the bathroom, and it was pretty intense. She said Buddy was great in bed. Lynn said she was still with him and would be meeting him next week in her own bed. Sue asked about how she felt about being in a relationship with him. Lynn said she didn't feel any guilt, because Sue, Paul, and Buddy are all different. She said Sue and Paul are a husband and wife, so they have different roles. Paul is there to do what she wants, and Buddy is there for good closeness. Lynn explained her strategy with me, saying I'm a good provider who follows orders. She mentioned using diversionary tactics, like checking for perfume, to make me believe she'd never cheat. Lynn said having me around was like having a little gay friend, and she could control him. She said she liked knowing where I was and never worrying about me catching her with a lover. Sue asked Susie if she had other lovers, and Susie said she couldn't count them. The first one was in their first year of marriage, picked up in a supermarket. He never knew her real name, and they bounced around hotel rooms for 6 months until he got too clingy. Susie said she needed to watch out with young guys after that. There were a series of one-night stands. Offs, including a salesman friend, into kinky stuff, which worked well, as he only came to town a few times a year. Susie said that she had kept Buddy busy for longer than almost any of them, describing him as a hound with a hole-splitting tool. Susie shared details about Buddy being married to a clueless woman while he played around, and mentioned being in. Sue told Lynn about her new conquest, and Sue ran through her prepared story about her fictional lover. Rod. The details weren't important, but Lynn believed every word, encouraging her to take full advantage. Sue expressed amazement at Lynn's control and doubted if she could treat Nick the way Lynn treated me. Lynn explained the situation to her. Lynn talked about how dominant animals in the animal kingdom act in comparison to the rest of the pack. She made it clear to Sue that she was the alpha and that Sue should take on a similar role with Nick. She told Sue that she'd be free and that Lynn would be there for her. Lynn said they should start with Rod and enjoy every moment, and that Nick would still be there and would fit into his natural submissive role. Lynn talked about how dominant individuals in the animal kingdom have to deal with the rest of the pack. She said she was the alpha and encouraged Sue to be the same with Nick, telling her she'd have her freedom. Lynn said they should start with Rod and have fun, and that Nick would be there and would fit into his natural submissive role. Lynn talked about STDs and asked if Sue used contraceptives. Sue said she usually made the guy use a condom, but with Buddy it was different because he was aggressive. She said she got scared once because it hurt to pee, but the doctor said it was just from the rough closeness. She said there was a time when she got infected with gonorrhea. Lynn talked about STDs and asked if Sue was using birth control. Sue said that she usually made the guy use it, but with Buddy it was different because he was so aggressive. She said she got scared once because it hurt to pee, but the doctor said it was just from how rough it was. She got gonorrhea once, and after that she was more careful. She asked how she could keep that from me, and Lynn said she let me go out by talking about his interest in playing the guitar with his friends. She looked at me deadpan and gave me the choice, which led to a confrontation later when she took antibiotics. Sue, eager to get the recording back to Nick and me, thanked Lynn and left for. After that, she was more careful. Sue asked how she kept that from me, and Lynn described letting me go out by mentioning his interest in playing the guitar with his pals. She looked at me deadpan and gave me the choice, which led to a confrontation later when she took antibiotics. Sue, eager to get the recording back to Nick and me, thanked Lynn and left for home. The conspirators watched the video, appalled. Sue and Nick could hardly recognize Lynn because she was never so harsh on me when others were around. I was shocked, though not as much as the couple, having come to know that Lynn was capable of almost anything. Sue brought up Anita White and mentioned her concerns about Anita's knowledge of her husband's infidelity at home. The conspirators watched the video and were shocked. Sue and Nick couldn't believe it. They could barely recognize Lynn because she was never so harsh on me when others were around. I was shocked, but not as much as the couple. I learned that Lynn was capable of almost anything. Sue brought up Anita White and mentioned her concerns about Anita's knowledge of her husband's infidelity. She expressed the dilemma of whether to inform Anita about Buddy being with Lynn, considering the risk of Anita blowing the cover. Sue described Anita as seeming deeply unhappy with her husband's reputation as a bully and pondered if Anita might be entirely cowed by him. Sue suggested that talking to Anita might affect her plans and sought help from Lynn in handling the situation. Sue said that she wanted to tell Anita about Buddy and Lynn, but she was worried about what might happen if Anita found out. She said that Anita seemed really unhappy with how Buddy had behaved in the past, and she wondered if Anita was just too scared of him. Sue said that talking to Anita might mess up her plans, so she asked Lynn to help her out with the situation. Sue thanked us for our help and said that we wouldn't be included in any more details. She specifically asked me not to do anything crazy in response. I said that I had made some mistakes in the past 10 years, but I didn't mean to do anything violent. I told them that I would handle it the way I thought was right and asked them to keep it secret. I asked everyone to not answer if Anita called and said that she would take full responsibility later that night. Sue called Anita White and introduced herself. They talked about the old parties at Holden's and Sue asked Anita if she could talk freely. Then Sue brought up the cheating part, saying that Buddy was cheating on Anita with someone Sue knew. She said she was sorry and that Anita should know. Then there was silence on the other end. After a while, Sue could hear sniffling and sobbing. Anita said she was frustrated and mentioned past problems that Buddy said were solved a year ago. She said she took him back. Sue called Anita White and they talked about how they'd met at Holden's parties. Sue said that Buddy was cheating on Anita with someone she knew, and Anita said she was sorry and that she had the right to know. Then there was some silence. Anita sounded upset, and she said that she was frustrated and that they had past issues that Buddy said were resolved a year ago. She said she had taken him back. She told him that he had to promise not to do it again and that she would end the relationship if he did. Sue said she was there to help, and Anita said she appreciated it. She said she was ready to move on, and she told Sue that Buddy wouldn't be staying in her bed again. She said that he would be getting nothing in case of a divorce because of cheating. She said he was unfit for a job. She said he was only good for going with her to events and having extramarital affairs. She said she was determined to make sure he faced the consequences. In response to my offer to gather evidence, Anita said she would stay calm for a few days until she had the evidence. Plans were made for someone to collect preliminary evidence from my office the next day. Sue arranged a meeting, contacting me at work to schedule an appointment in her office on Monday at 1 p.m. She said she was only good for going with her to events and having extramarital affairs. She said she'd make sure he faced the consequences. In response to my offer to gather evidence, Anita said she'd keep her cool for a few days until she had the evidence. Plans were made for someone to collect preliminary evidence from my office the next day. Sue arranged a meeting, contacting me at work to schedule an appointment in her office on Monday at 1:00 p.m. I introduced myself to Mrs. White, the wife of the man involved with my wife, in Sue's office with a video camera. I placed the camera on her desk, cued the relevant section, and played the recording. Despite the faint screen visibility, the audio quality was excellent. I saw that Mrs. White was crying, and I offered a comforting gesture, acknowledging her familiarity. I told Anita about my plans, saying that participation was optional but that I was still offering it. Anita told me about the years of intimidation she had gone through and how she wanted to turn the tables and make her husband suffer. When I asked her about potential violence, she said that things might get messy, but I told her I didn't want to cause any harm. After the meeting with Anita, work started bugging me. I was still thinking about the video, and I felt like Lynn had a point. I told her I was trying to be nice, and I understood why she thought I was a wimp, but I was trying to be more. I told her I wasn't planning on causing any harm after the meeting with Anita, but work was a bummer. I was still feeling the effects of Lynn's words in the video, and I knew she had some truth to her remarks. I told her I'm usually pretty easygoing, and I understood her view of me as a wimp, even though I was hurt. I thought about showing a different side of myself on Thursday. I thought about how Lynn would react to me being more assertive. but I decided it wasn't worth it to try to make things better. I knew we had lost the trust in our relationship for good on Tuesday and Wednesday. I was less productive at the office on Tuesday and Wednesday because I was thinking about all the different things that could happen. It was a lot to think about, and it reminded me that things can change really easily. I thought about all the different things that could happen, including what I wanted to do. Thursday's events would need me to make things up as I go and spend time getting better at the physical stuff at home. Things were tense, so we only talked about the basics. Lynn, who is usually pretty confident, was looking at my behavior lately and trying to figure out why. On Thursday, we talked about a bunch of different plans, and we thought about all kinds of possible results, including the one I was really into. We figured that Thursday's events would need some improvising and time to work on my physical skills. At home, things were tense, and we mostly stuck to talking about the basics. Lynn, who's usually pretty confident, was paying attention to how I've been acting lately, trying to figure out what's going on and take charge. It's kind of funny, but she was even thinking about what it'd be like if I had a hot date with Buddy on Tuesday night. As Lynn was showering, I went through my dresser and looked for a little keepsake from my grandpa. My dad and grandpa both had military backgrounds, and grandpa, after Normandy, he got a set of steel knuckles from a German soldier as a war souvenir. As I looked at the menacing steel equipment, I remembered grandpa's warning about using it, but I also remembered how he said it might come in handy someday. That day had almost arrived. It was a form of war. Lynn and her lover had been playing unfairly, which made me want to force a. I knew I wouldn't eat lunch, but I hoped to slow down my rival. Pacing in my office, I put things in the guest bedroom, depending on whether Lynn would wait in the backyard or go inside after opening the gate. I could adapt, manipulate the set of knuckles on my desk. I paced, stoking my controlled anger by 1:00:00. I changed into jeans, a t-shirt, and sturdy running shoes, checked my pockets, cell phone, keys, knuckles, and wallet. I called Lynn from my desk phone to preempt her call. The conversation was calm and non-confrontational. We talked about meetings and how I'd be unavailable on the phone, and she figured I was going to be late getting home. She thought I was being chill, and maybe she'd be cool about it and we'd get to hang out that night. She was getting ready to meet her lover. I put on some jeans, a t-shirt, and my running shoes, checked my pockets, phone, keys, knuckles, and wallet. I called Lynn from my desk phone to preempt her call. The conversation was calm and non-threatening. We talked about meetings and phone unavailability, and I let her know I was thinking about a possible delay in returning home. Lynn interpreted my call as a sign of returning docility, relaxing with this knowledge. Perhaps she'd reward me with some alone time that evening. She prepared to meet her lover, and the two of them drove to the park in 20 minutes. Lover boy's car was absent, so Anita dropped him off, and he jogged to his house, slipping into the backyard through the side gate, positioned behind a fatina bush on the house's end, away from the garage. I waited nervously, checking the time on my phone. At 1:45 Lynn came out of the backyard wearing a string bikini, heading to the back gate after unlocking it and looking around. She closed the gate and sat down in a lounge chair under the pecan tree. This was my signal. I had left the side gate open. I went back through the opening, circled to the front door, and used my key to open it. I walked over the spot where my wife's betrayal had been exposed days earlier. I went in. Lynn came out in the backyard, wearing a string bikini, and went to the back gate after unlocking it and checking out the alley. She closed the gate and got into a lounge chair under the pecan tree. This made me think that I had left the side gate open. I went back through the opening, circled around to the front door, and used my key to open it. I walked over the spot where my wife's betrayal had been exposed a few days earlier. I went into the spare room and grabbed a cordless drill and some hardware. I was in the master bedroom in less than a minute. I put a hasp on the inside of the door, leaving a lock hanging, and put a small piece of wood between the door edge and the jamb. I put it there so that my wife couldn't close it, just in case she tried to shut it. With my heart pounding, I took the drill to the guest room, picked up the video camera, put brass knuckles on my right hand, and waited. I grabbed a cordless drill and some hardware, and in less than a minute, I was in the master bedroom. I installed a hasp on the inside of the door, leaving a lock hanging, and I put a small piece of wood between the door edge and the jamb. I thought it wouldn't close, just in case my wife tried to shut it. With heart pounding, I took the drill to the guest room, picked up the video camera, put brass knuckles on my right hand, and waited. Many things could have gone wrong. I might have forgotten a step. Lynn could have unlocked the gate earlier, or her lover could have arrived prematurely. Fortunately, none of that happened. With controlled breath, I awaited the final assault, planned and executed on my terms. Standing with brass knuckles on my right hand, I held the video camera, peering through the slightly open guest bedroom door. The dark hallway might impact video quality. A lot of things could have gone wrong. I might have forgotten a step. Lynn could have unlocked the gate earlier, or her lover could have arrived too early. Luckily, none of that happened. With controlled breath, I waited for the final assault, which I planned and executed on my terms. I held the video camera in my right hand, and I stood with brass knuckles. The dark hallway might have affected the video quality, but the audio would be crucial. The sliding glass door moved, and voices emerged. Lynn's laughter mingled with a male growl. I imagined a man's hands on her, and I glimpsed my wife's bikini top, which she had already discarded. She entered the master bedroom with her lover, neglecting to close the door. I followed at a distance, still recording. I knelt at the door and observed Buddy embracing Lynn, who closed her eyes and unbuttoned his shirt carefully. I could hear the audio, and it was wild. The sliding glass door moved, and there were voices. Lynn was laughing, and it sounded like a man's growl. I could picture the man's hands on her. I saw my wife's bikini top, and she was already in the master bedroom with her lover. She didn't close the door. I followed at a distance, still recording. I saw Buddy embracing Lynn, who closed her eyes and unbuttoned his shirt. I set the video camera on the dresser inside the door, and it was recording the scene on the bed. This waiting was the hardest part. I wanted to record the undeniable act, and I was angry. I backed off the door, and I stood ready, keeping an eye on the couple. I didn't want to get caught. I saw the couple caressing each other, and they were now undressed. They had the whole afternoon ahead of them, so they took their time, enjoying the passion. I set the camera on the dresser inside the door to record the scene on the bed. Waiting was the hardest part. I was so angry, but I had to control myself. I backed off the door and stood ready, trying not to be noticed. I watched the couple touch each other. They were both naked, and they still had hours to go. They took their time, enjoying each other's company. Outside the door, I heard Lynn talking about Buddy as Daddy, which confirmed my suspicions about her daddy issues. I couldn't wait to confront them. I heard Buddy say he was excited. Then I saw the man between Lynn's legs, and I heard her scream in a way I'd never heard her before. They started moving together, yelling and making noises I couldn't understand. I heard Lynn talking about Buddy's daddy, and it confirmed my suspicions about her daddy issues. I couldn't wait to confront them. I heard Buddy's voice, and I saw the man between Lynn's legs. Then I saw them move together and hear her scream in an unusual way. They were cursing and making noises I couldn't understand. I touched my brass knuckles for luck and quietly walked over to the bed. Lynn saw me just as I shoved Buddy's ribs and pushed him out of her. He screamed and accused Buddy of violating my wife. I was shocked when Buddy's face changed and he started acting like a bully. He went to deal with me, so I took a few steps back. Buddy turned the corner of the bed and went toward him. I thought Lynn was retreating, but she was on her knees. I got down on my knees, grabbed the covers, and yelled for Lynn to get out and not hurt Buddy. I shifted back on my trailing foot, took a running step, and hurled myself into Buddy's chest, delivering the brass knuckles forcefully to the solar plexus. They crashed to the floor with my full weight compressing his chest. In situations where breathing is compromised, all other considerations become irrelevant, but he pushed, trying to dislodge me, emitting a high-pitched sound. I grabbed the covers, yelling for him to get out and not get hurt. I shifted back on my trailing foot, took a running step, and hurled myself into his chest, delivering the brass knuckles forcefully to the solar plexus. They crashed to the floor with my full weight compressing his chest. In situations where breathing is compromised, all other considerations become irrelevant. But he pushed, trying to dislodge me, emitting a pitched whining noise while struggling to breathe. Panic filled his eyes. He sat up and straddled my opponent. I observed Buddy's hands pressing on the floor, trying to find a better position to breathe. I then administered the coup de grace, raising my right hand high and bringing the steel on my fist down directly onto the center of his terrified face with considerable force. With nowhere for his head to recoil and mitigate the blow, I heard bone satisfyingly crunch, and I witnessed blood pouring from Buddy's ruined. His face was all bloody, and he couldn't move. I went to the door, ignoring Lynn's screams until she finally asked me for help. I realized she thought I was leaving, following the plan for psychological warfare. After I kicked the little wood piece away from the jamb, I closed the door and locked the latch. I turned to face covered in blood. Buddy was totally knocked out. I got up and went to the door, ignoring Lynn's screams until she finally asked me for help. I realized she thought I was leaving, following the plan for psychological warfare. After kicking the small piece of wood away from the jamb, I closed the door and locked the latch. I turned to face Lynn. I saw her expression change from anger to realization that we were all locked in. She was undressed and had no protection from this unpredictable version of her husband. She changed her tone, pleading with me. Paul, oh Paul. I know it looks bad, but he forced me into this. He's a bully. He threatened to hurt me and you, too. He said he would destroy you to have me. I had to do it. I didn't want to. She approached. Lynn's face changed from angry to realizing that we were all locked in. She was naked and had no protection from her husband's unpredictable side. She changed her tone, pleading with me. Paul, oh Paul, I know it looks bad, but he forced me into this. He's a bully. He threatened to hurt me and you, too. He said he would destroy you to have me. I had to do it. I didn't want to approach the bed slowly as she explained. I kept a stoic expression, dismissing her with a stern command. I said, shut up. You're lying. I know you've been involved with him for months. I redirected my attention to the hurt person on the floor, who was gurgling and showing signs of distress. I made it clear that I wanted Buddy hurt, not dead. I carefully positioned him close to the iron bedstead and placed him on his side. As she was explaining, I kept my face straight and said, shut up. You're lying. I know you've been with him for months. I turned my attention to the hurt person on the floor, who was making noise and looking bad. I said that I didn't want Buddy hurt, but dead. I got 5 pairs of handcuffs from the top dresser drawer and used them to tie Buddy's ankles and wrists to the bed. Then I went back to my wife, who was lying on the floor. I moved her legs off the bed, put her hands behind her back, and guided her into the bathroom. I sat her down on the toilet and said, you need to tell me what happened and don't hurt anyone. I got the brass knuckles out of my fist and made sure she could see them as I said, I need you to tell me everything. I asked her how she met the other person, why she did what she did, and why she thought it was okay to betray me. I also asked about the other men she'd been with in the last 10 years. I said, we've got plenty of time to figure this out. I made it clear that I was on the lookout for anything out of the ordinary, like brass knuckles on my right fist. I demanded to know everything, how she met the other person, the reasons behind her actions, and why she thought it was okay to betray me. I also asked about her other relationships over the past 10 years, making it clear that we had plenty of time to dig into the story. Lynn made a calculated decision considering that I wouldn't be spending time with her lover. I knew some details about her actions, but the extent of my knowledge remained uncertain. Questions lingered in my mind. Could she manipulate certain aspects to make her fidelity sound less treacherous? Was she daring enough to lie? Lynn expressed her reluctance, sharing that she never intended for the situation to unfold as it did. She described I decided to do it because I wouldn't be spending time with her lover. I knew some stuff about what she was doing, but I wasn't sure how much. I had questions, like could she make it sound like she was more faithful than she really was? Was she bold enough to lie? Lynn said she wasn't expecting things to go the way they did. She talked about how this guy came up to her at a party and convinced her to go upstairs with him. She didn't know what he was up to. Lynn was in a tough spot, and there was no one around to help her out. I asked what the party was, and Sue said she could give more details. She said that she was there too, and that I should talk to her if I wanted more info. Lynn thought Sue or Nick might have spilled the beans. She insisted that Sue only saw the New Year's party, but I reminded her it was Halloween, when she'd been with the other guy over 20 times. I was dead set on finding out the truth, so I asked her who might have spilled the beans. With a sense of defiance, Lynn said, "You'd be surprised how many people Loverboy has told. Maybe it's was one of them, but that doesn't matter. Sue told you this, that person. I'll claw her eyes out, but I know something about her that will wreck her marriage, and I'll sure as hell use it." After Lynn shared details about Sue's fabricated lover Rod, she claimed credit for inventing him for my benefit. She described how they orchestrated conversations to extract information, with Sue recording the entire exchange and storing it on multiple devices. DVDs to be sent out at her discretion. Lynn clarified that Sue hadn't initially informed her of the situation and no specific details were provided by Sue regarding the revelation about the New Year's party. I pointed out that I learned about her extensive history during a video conversation. I recalled a phone call Lynn made to her lover last Saturday in our entryway, where she openly expressed affection for him inadvertently. I told her I had enough info to know that she had a lot of past issues. I said that she should talk to my lawyer and that papers would be sent to her in a few days. I said I wanted to talk to an attorney about what was going on, and I got my phone and called Anita. After a short talk, I ended the call and marched Lynn back. I told her everything. I said that if she wanted to talk more, she should talk to my lawyer. I'd be sending legal papers to her in a couple days. I said I needed to talk to an attorney about what was going on. I got my phone and called Anita to handle it. After a short talk, I laughed and ended the call. Walked Lynn back into the bedroom. I showed her the sorry state of her lover, undressed, handcuffed, wheezing, and covered in blood, almost causing her to vomit. I put her on the bed, turned off the video camera, unlocked the bedroom door, and opened it for Anita, who had been waiting outside in her car. I said to Anita, "Well, Anita, I saved you some of him. His face is not much to look at now, though. Here's his latest lover, my soon-to-be." I showed her the poor state of her lover, who was handcuffed, wheezing, and covered in blood, and almost caused her to vomit. I put her on the bed, turned off the video camera, unlocked the bedroom door, and opened it for Anita, who had been waiting outside in her car. I told Anita, "Well, Anita, I saved you some of him. His face is not much to look at now, though. Here's his latest lover, his soon-to-be ex-wife, Lynn. Have anything to say to her?" Anita approached Lynn, who was sitting on the bed, and slapped her hard across the left cheek, evening out the red marks on her face. She expressed frustration and berated Lynn for her foolishness, revealing how highly she regarded the man lying on the floor. Turning to me, Anita pondered, "What are we going to do with him now?" "Anita, I'm inclined to toss this one out the door with no clothes on." I asked Lynn if she had anything to say to Anita. Anita approached Lynn, who was sitting on the bed, and slapped her hard across the left cheek, evening out the red marks on her face. She expressed frustration and berated Lynn for her foolishness. She also revealed how highly she regarded the man lying on the floor. Turning to me, Anita asked, "What are we going to do with him now?" I replied, "I'm inclined to toss this one out the door with no clothes on and see how long it takes her to find another companion." Get it, companion. I expressed relief that she had preserved his tool, for I mentioned having a razor-sharp new hunting knife and suggested cutting off his tool to present it to Lynn, who seemed to adore it. I also considered stashing his balls in the vault for the safety of women in the town. I intended to enforce my prenup, putting his balls in a vice as he would. I told her I'd keep an eye on things, and I gave her his tool. I said I had a new hunting knife, and I suggested cutting off his tool to give to Lynn, who seemed to love it. I also thought about stashing his balls in the vault to protect women in the town. I told him I'd make sure he wouldn't get anything if he got caught cheating. We planned to take him to the hospital and make up a story about finding him hurt in the garage. This would make sure he'd cooperate, knowing he could be cut off without a dime. I thought I'd throw him a few crumbs about Lynn. I mentioned her attachment to her father and thought about if there was more to their story during her upbringing. Even though I didn't have any proof if things got messy, I'd just have to deal with it. Divorce, I said that her dad might cut her off, like he did with her sister, to protect his reputation and money. I'd keep some interesting videos to share if I had to keep her under control. I decided to let her get dressed, take her car, and find a place to think about things, telling her that her ATM and credit cards wouldn't work. I gave her a quarter, sarcastically saying it was for a 2. I told her that her dad might cut her out of his will, like he did with her sister, to protect his reputation and money. After the divorce, I would keep interesting videos to share if I had to keep her under control. I decided to let her get dressed, take her car, and find a place to think about things. I told her her ATM and credit cards wouldn't work. I gave her a quarter, sarcastically saying it was for a 2. We sometimes reached out to each other when feeling down. We were both hesitant to get into another relationship after being burned. I admitted the pain caused by my harsh treatment of Lynn during the ordeal, recognizing it wasn't we were just friends, but we'd been through a tough time, and it had made us both pretty wary of getting into another relationship. I knew I'd been pretty cruel to Lynn during that whole thing, and I'd even compared it to a war, where cruelty can happen. I promised myself I'd never do that again. But I didn't regret marrying Buddy. Anita's insurance covered the basic repairs to Buddy's face, and she cut him loose with a little more money than the prenup required. His attempts to attract women proved challenging in the months that followed. My depression deepened, and I faded from sight. Lynn accepted a fair settlement and moved in with her sister, seeking help. She grappled with the severe miscalculation of her actions, feeling sick when watching nature shows about animal predators. Terms like alpha dog or pecking order triggered discomfort and nightmares about that night with Buddy and me. Despite occasional feelings of missing me, I harbored no such sentiments towards her.